The palace of the alien empire was unlike anything the human girl had ever seen. Towering spires of shining metal stretched toward the sky, catching the light of 3 suns. Every wall, every floor, even the ceilings were decorated with strange symbols that glowed softly. The air smelled faintly sweet, and soft music floated through the halls. It was beautiful and terrifying. The girl, Mara, had been brought here as a guest, though she never expected to see the inside of the palace herself. Most humans had only heard stories about this alien royalty, stories of their power, their pride, and their cruelty. Mara had always been curious, brave in ways that sometimes got her into trouble, and today, that bravery led her into the most dangerous place in the galaxy. As she walked the grand corridor, her eyes darted from one amazing detail to another. Statues of alien heroes stood in every corner, each one larger than human house. The floors were polished to a mirror shine, reflecting her small human frame. Every step she took echoed slightly, reminding her how alone she felt in this alien world. "Stay close to the guide," a voice whispered. Mara had been told this repeatedly, but she wanted more than just a guided tour. She wanted to see the palace, to feel its power, to understand the aliens who rule the stars. She glanced at her guide, a small alien creature with 6 arms, and gave a slight nod. Then she turned a corner, curiosity pulling her deeper into the palace. It was here, in a wide hall lit by golden light, that she saw them, the alien royalty. They were taller than any human she had ever seen, dressed in flowing robes that shimmered like liquid metal. Their faces were sharp, angular, almost cruel in their beauty, and they moved with the confidence of beings who had never faced failure in their lives. Mara froze. She hadn't expected to be seen. The aliens stopped speaking for a moment, their glowing eyes turning toward her. A hush fell across the hall. Mara felt her heartbeat in her throat. This was not the moment to act clumsy. Then it happened. One of the younger royals, a prince whose arrogance was visible in every gesture, stepped forward. He pushed Mara lightly, but the force was enough to send her stumbling backward. "Watch where you are going, human," he said, his voice smooth and dangerous. Mara's heart pounded. She had expected rudeness, perhaps curiosity, but not this. She stumbled, almost falling, but managed to catch herself. Her hand brushed the smooth wall, leaving a faint mark. She could feel every eye in the hall on her. The courtiers whispered among themselves, voices low but tense. Mara's first instinct was fear. She could feel the weight of the alien royalty pressing down on her. But then, as she straightened, she realized something. She was not alone. Some of the courtiers looked uncertain. Some seemed annoyed by the prince's arrogance. She could feel the tension in the air, a tension that promised something unexpected. "Are you all right?" A deep, calm voice said suddenly. The entire hall seemed to pause. Mara turned, her eyes wide, and saw the emperor. He was tall, taller than even the prince, with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His presence commanded attention, respect, and even fear. The prince's face shifted for a moment, a flash of fear crossing his arrogant expression. Mara barely noticed, her attention caught by the emperor. There was something in his gaze, a quiet power that made the air itself feel heavier. He walked toward them slowly, each step measured, deliberate. The court fell silent as he approached. Mara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had read stories of the emperor, tales of his wisdom and his temper. No one dared to challenge him openly. And here he was, walking directly toward her and the prince. "You pushed her," the emperor said, his voice low but sharp. Every word echoed through the hall. "Why?" The prince faltered. She was in the wrong place," he stammered. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something fragile, almost human. The emperor's eyes narrowed. "In my palace, all guests are under my protection. Do you understand?" "Yes, your majesty," the prince whispered, bowing his head. Mara could barely breathe. She had never imagined an alien emperor could command such respect and fear with single presence. She stayed silent, unsure whether to bow or remain standing. Her human instincts told her to stay firm. After all, she had not done anything wrong. The emperor studied her for a moment, his gaze almost piercing. Then, surprisingly, he spoke to her directly. Are you unharmed, human? Yes, Your Majesty, Mara replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her. A small murmur went through the court. The Emperor nodded slightly. Good, then we shall continue. For a moment, Mara thought the tension had passed, but she could feel the whispers behind her. The courtiers were talking in low tones, some curious, some angry. The young prince looked furious, but he dared not speak. Mara realized something important. Her presence here had already changed something. The aliens were not treating her as a mere human, as a weak species to be ignored. Something about the way she had stood her ground, the way she had faced the prince without fear, had unsettled them. As the Emperor led her through the palace, Mara noticed the subtle changes in behavior around her. Eyes followed her, sometimes with suspicion, sometimes with admiration. The courtiers whispered, and some exchanged glances that hinted at concern. The young prince trailed behind, his pride wounded, plodding silently. Mara had to remind herself to stay calm. She was just a human girl, alone in an alien palace filled with beings who could crush her without effort. But something inside her refused to bow. She had courage, and perhaps that courage was the key to surviving this encounter. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the hall. Mara jumped, her heart racing. The court froze again. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. A servant, small and scuttling, had dropped a tray of glowing crystal objects. The sound of shattering metal and glass rang through the hall. The prince smirked slightly, thinking he could blame Mara. See, he whispered to a courtier. She causes chaos wherever she goes. Mara's cheeks burned, but she refused to react. She looked at the Emperor, expecting judgment or anger, but he simply raised a hand, a gesture of calm authority, and the hall slowly returned to silence. The Emperor's voice was calm, but it carried weight that made the prince's smirk vanish. Mistakes happen. Humans are fragile, but no one shall be blamed for accidents in my palace. Mara exhaled quietly, relief washing over her. She had survived the first challenge, but she knew this was only the beginning. The prince's pride would not forgive this easily, and some of the courtiers were clearly upset by the Emperor's leniency. As they continued walking, Mara noticed the intricate decorations on the walls. Murals of alien victories, symbols of power, and images of strange creatures. Everything in this palace told a story, and Mara realized that every corner, every object, was part of a larger plan. The Emperor finally stopped at a balcony overlooking the city. Mara looked down, her human eyes wide with wonder. The city below was a maze of alien architecture, with flying ships zipping through the air, bridges spanning across glowing rivers, and people moving in patterns that seemed impossible. Humans rarely come here, the Emperor said quietly, almost to himself. Most would not survive long in my presence. Mara turned to look at him, curious. Why are you showing me this? The Emperor's eyes softened slightly. Because you are different. You stand your ground. You do not bend to fear alone. That is rare among humans. Mara felt a mix of pride and disbelief. She had not expected respect here, only danger. And yet, the Emperor, the most powerful being in the galaxy, had acknowledged her bravery. But Mara also knew the danger was far from over. The prince would seek revenge, and other nobles might see her as a threat or an insult to their pride. Every step she took in this palace could spark a new challenge, a new test of courage. And somewhere deep inside, Mara realized one more thing. Her life had changed forever the moment she stepped into this hall. She was no longer just a human girl exploring a new world. She had become part of the story, part of the palace intrigue, part of a power struggle that could change the galaxy itself. As the sun began to set behind the palace towers, casting long shadows across the floor, Mara took a deep breath. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. She would not back down, no matter what. The palace was vast, the aliens powerful, and the dangers real. But Mara had courage, and in a world where most humans were ignored, that courage was the most dangerous weapon of all. And with that thought, the human girl stepped forward into the heart of the alien empire, unaware that the next moment would change everything. The air in the grand hall was heavy with tension. Mara could feel every pair of alien eyes on her, following her small human frame as she walked beside the Emperor. The young prince, whose arrogance had caused her stumble earlier, trailed behind like a storm waiting to break. Whispers swirled through the court, soft yet sharp enough to make her skin crawl. For a human, the palace was a place of awe. For the aliens, it was their world, and Mara had just stepped into the center of it, and survived. That fact alone stirred curiosity, and perhaps fear, among the royal courtiers. The emperor led her to a side hall, quieter and less adorned, yet still grand in every sense. Statues of alien ancestors stood in rows, their glowing eyes seeming to follow Mara wherever she moved. She could feel the power emanating from them, a reminder that she was far from home, far from anyone who could protect her. "Do not fear," the emperor said softly, his voice carrying authority without anger. "You are under my protection while you remain in this palace." Mara swallowed hard. She wanted to trust him, yet every instinct told her to remain alert. Humans were fragile, and one wrong move could anger the wrong alien, changing everything in an instant. The young prince stopped a few steps behind, muttering under his breath. Mara caught fragments of his words. "Disrespectful human, doesn't belong insolent." He glanced at the emperor, who had not yet turned to face him, and his jaw clenched. The human girl realized this was not just a minor incident. The prince's pride had been wounded, and he would not forgive easily. The emperor finally stopped near a balcony overlooking a courtyard. Alien courtiers stood in careful lines, their expressions unreadable. Some watched Mara with curiosity, others with suspicion. Mara felt as if she were the subject of some silent trial. "You have courage," the emperor said, looking directly at her. "Most humans would bow or hide in fear. You did not." Mara blinked. Courage? She had only been trying not to fall. But the emperor's eyes were serious, and there was weight in his words. In this world, courage seemed to matter more than strength, more than experience. The prince scoffed audibly. "Courage," he muttered. "Do you call this courage?" She nearly ruined the hall with her clumsiness. "She is nothing more than a weak human, barely able to stand in my presence." Mara felt her cheeks burn, but she refused to respond. She had learned that in this palace, words could be weapons, and reacting hastily could be deadly. She remained calm, keeping her gaze steady on the emperor. The emperor's eyes flicked to Prince. "Silence," he said, his voice low but final. The entire hall seemed to tremble at the command. "You will not insult my guests." The prince froze, visibly struggling against the authority of the emperor. Some courtiers shifted uncomfortably. Mara realized that even among the aliens, not everyone agreed with the prince's arrogance. There were factions, subtle movements of loyalty and power that she had only glimpsed before. A sudden sound interrupted the tension, a soft, metallic clatter from the courtyard below. Mara looked down and saw a servant stumble, dropping a tray of glowing liquid crystals. The bright shards skittered across the ground, reflecting the golden light of the palace. The prince smirked. "See? Chaos follows her wherever she goes," he whispered, loud enough for a nearby courtier to hear. Mara's heart raced. She could not allow this to escalate. If the court blamed her for the accident, it could be dangerous. She took a careful step forward, bending slightly to pick up one of the shards. The emperor's gaze followed her every move, but he did not intervene. "You see," the emperor said quietly, almost to himself, "humans are delicate, but their minds, sometimes they surprise even the most powerful beings." Mara straightened, holding the shard carefully. She realized that in this palace, actions mattered as much as words. The emperor's respect was fragile, easily lost if she misstepped. But it seemed he was willing to give her a chance, a rare gift in a world ruled by pride and power. The young prince's eyes narrowed. He could not understand why the emperor would offend human. In his mind, humans were weak, insignificant creatures, and now one had entered the palace, survived a direct insult, and gained the emperor's attention. It was an affront to his status. Suddenly, one of the older courtiers stepped forward. She was tall, with flowing robes that shimmered in pale silver. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "Your Majesty," she said, "allowing a human to stand in our halls. It could be seen as weakness. Some may think we tolerate them too much." The emperor's gaze turned to her, unflinching. "It is not weakness to recognize courage where it exists. The human girl has shown respect and restraint. That is enough." Mara felt a small surge of relief. The Emperor's words were clear, yet she knew this was only the beginning. Not all in the court would accept her presence. Some would resent it, some would challenge it, and the prince, he would not forgive. The court fell silent again, the tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Mara realized that every eye in the palace was now watching her, measuring her. Every step she took, every word she spoke, could tip the balance of favor or fury. As they continued walking to the palace, Mara noticed subtle signs of the court's intrigue. Courtiers whispered in corners, glancing at her with suspicion or curiosity. Some eyes were kind, others hostile. She understood that in this world, respect was earned through observation, and survival depended on perception. A sudden sound of metal striking metal drew her attention. The young prince had unsheathed a ceremonial weapon, spinning in his hand, a silent threat. Mara's pulse quickened. She knew this was not a challenge she could fight physically. Humans were weak in comparison, but perhaps humans had other tools. The Emperor noticed her gaze and spoke softly. Do not fear him. He tests you because he does not understand. Some will never see courage as it is. They only measure by pride and strength. Mara nodded. She felt a small spark of determination. If she survived here, it would not be by brute force. It would be by intelligence, patience, and courage. She would need every skill she had, every ounce of her human cleverness, to navigate this palace. As they reached the central hall, the scene became even more intimidating. Alien royalty from all over the empire had gathered. Their eyes glowed softly, expressions unreadable. Mara felt a wave of awe and fear. This was power unlike any she had known. The Emperor stopped in the center, and all eyes turned to him. Mara stayed just behind him, small and fragile in the midst of such beings. And then, slowly he spoke. This human girl, the Emperor said, his voice carrying over the hall, has shown courage in the face of arrogance. She stands where most would fall. And for that, she is under my protection. The murmurs began immediately. Some whispered admiration, others resentment. Mara realized that the Emperor's declaration had not just offended her. It had shifted the balance of the court. For the first time, humans were being acknowledged as more than insignificant creatures. The young prince's face twisted in anger. He had expected the Emperor to side with him, to punish Mara, to reaffirm the hierarchy of alien superiority. Instead, the Emperor had humiliated him, subtly but unmistakably. Mara felt a flicker of fear. The prince would not accept this quietly. She would have to be careful every moment, every action, every word. But she also felt something new, a sense of strength. The Emperor had given her a chance, and she would make it count. The court slowly began to disperse, though some eyes remained fixed on her. Mara could feel the weight of their gaze, the silent judgments, the whispered plotting. But she also felt a small sense of pride. She had survived the first true test in the palace, and she had done so without fear. The Emperor turned to her, his expression calm but unreadable. Rest now, he said. You have done well. But remember, the palace is full of eyes. Not all of them see as I do. Mara nodded. She knew this was not just a lesson, it was a warning. She was in a place where the strong ruled, where pride and power dictated every action, and where a single misstep could be fatal. As she left the central hall, she caught one last glance at the young prince. His eyes were narrowed, a storm of anger and resentment brewing. Mara realized that this was far from over. The palace was alive with intrigue, and she was now part of it. And deep down, she understood something crucial. Her courage had earned her a chance, but it also marked her as a challenge. And in this palace, challenges were never ignored. The suns outside were setting, casting long, golden shadows across the palace floor. Mara took a deep breath and stepped forward into the corridor, ready to face whatever came next. Because in the heart of the alien empire, the smallest human could make the largest ripple, and Mara intended to make hers. The grand hall of the alien palace was silent. Even the whispers had died down, replaced by a tense stillness that pressed on Mara's chest. She stood near the balcony, gazing at the glowing city below. But her thoughts were elsewhere. The young prince, who had pushed her earlier, glared from across the room. He was silent now, but Mara could feel the fury simmering beneath the surface. Every step she took, every movement of her hand, was being watched. The emperor had not left her side. He walked slowly, deliberately, his long robes whispering against the polished floor. His eyes, calm yet piercing, seemed to see everything at once. Mara felt a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. She had been treated with respect. But this palace held dangers she could barely imagine. One wrong step could provoke the prince or the other nobles. Suddenly, the emperor stopped. Mara turned toward him, sensing the tension. He stood tall, shoulders squared, his gaze sweeping across the court. The hall seemed to shrink under his presence. Even the young prince's glare faltered slightly. "I have spoken," the emperor began, his voice deep and commanding. "And yet, I see that my actions have caused confusion. Some among you think I have erred. They question why a human girl stands unpunished in my palace." The court murmured softly. Some voices whispered in agreement with the emperor, others with the prince. Mara realized the palace was divided, not by force, but by pride, honor, and perception. Every alien present was carefully measuring the situation. The emperor's eyes turned to Mara, softening just a fraction. "Human," he said, "you have entered my court bravely. You have shown restraint, courage, and respect. Yet, I understand that the young prince's actions cause you distress. For that, I apologize." Mara's breath caught. The emperor was apologizing to her. She had never imagined a being so powerful, so revered across the galaxy, would bow his authority to acknowledge her suffering. Her human heart felt both proud and astonished. The young prince's face twisted in fury. He opened his mouth, likely to protest, but the emperor raised a hand, and the hall fell completely silent. Mara could hear the faint hum of the palace lights, the soft rustle of robes, and the echo of her own heartbeat. "You," the emperor said, his gaze piercing the prince, "must learn that strength is not only measured in power. Arrogance is no shield against courage. Today, this human girl has shown a quality many of you lack: dignity under pressure, and I honor that." A low murmur ran through the court. Some courtiers shifted uneasily, impressed by the emperor's words. Others scowled, clearly uncomfortable with the unusual display. Mara could feel the eyes of the nobles scanning her, their judgmental gazes softening just slightly. The young prince's hands clenched into fists. Mara could sense his anger radiating like heat, but he remained silent, carefully hiding his rage under the mask of decorum. The emperor, however, did not look away. His eyes held the weight of centuries of power, yet there was a quiet patience in his gaze, an unspoken warning that defiance here would not go unchallenged. Mara felt a strange calm settle over her. The apology, the emperor's words, had shifted something in the room. She was no longer just a human guest. She was someone recognized, someone respected, at least by the most powerful being in the galaxy. That realization gave her courage she hadn't felt before. The emperor turned fully to face the court now, his voice rising slightly, so that every noble could hear. "Let it be known," he said, "that in my palace, every guest, every being, regardless of origin, is under my protection. Arrogance and pride do not excuse cruelty. Strength lies in wisdom, courage, and restraint. Remember this lesson well." The court was silent again, this time in awe. Mara could see the courtiers exchanging glances, their whispers replaced by stunned silence. The young prince's face was pale, his pride wounded, but he dared not speak. The emperor's presence, his authority, was unchallenged. Mara's thoughts drifted. She had entered this palace uncertain, afraid, and unprepared. Now, she understood that her courage had not only kept her alive, but had earned her a rare gift: the emperor's respect. She realized that humans, despite their small size and apparent weakness, possessed qualities the aliens could not fully understand: resilience, intelligence, and moral courage. The emperor stepped closer to Mara. "You have faced arrogance and danger without faltering. That is rare, even among the strongest of your kind. I admire your bravery." Mara bowed slightly, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you, your majesty. I only tried to do what was right." The emperor nodded. "And that is enough. Courage is not only in action, but in the choice to stand when others would fall. You have chosen wisely." The prince shifted behind them, clearly simmering with anger and humiliation. Mara could feel in the air a tension so sharp it could slice through the thick palace walls. But the Emperor seemed to sense it as well. "Prince," the Emperor said, turning to him with steady gaze, "let this be a lesson to all in this court. Strength without wisdom is weakness. Humility before courage is honor. And arrogance before the unknown leads only to failure." The prince's jaw tightened. Mara felt a shiver of anticipation. She knew that even though the Emperor had spoken, not everyone would accept it. Some would plot, some would wait for the first sign of weakness. She realized that surviving the palace would require more than courage. It would require strategy, patience, and sharp observation. A soft, mechanical hum echoed through the hall, drawing everyone's attention. Servants carrying trays of alien delicacies moved quietly, their glowing eyes fixed on the scene. The humans and aliens alike paused, sensing that something momentous was happening. Mara understood that she was at the center of a moment that would be remembered for years. The Emperor turned to her once more. "Do not let fear rule your actions," he said softly. "You are small in size, but your spirit is large. That spirit is more valuable than any weapon, more enduring than any army." Mara felt a surge of pride. In this palace, surrounded by beings who could crush her instantly, she had been acknowledged for her courage. The Emperor's words resonated deeply within her, igniting a confidence she had never known. The young prince finally spoke, his voice low and trembling with restrained anger. You favor her over us?" The Emperor's eyes met his. "I favor courage, wisdom, and honor over arrogance, pride, and cruelty. That is my choice." The prince's face turned red with fury, but he did not argue further. Mara could sense that he was seething, plotting for later, but the Emperor's presence, his calm authority, had forced him to restrain himself for now. Mara realized something important. In this palace, respect was not given lightly, but once earned, it could shield a human even from the most powerful alien. The Emperor had given her that respect, and in return, she had gained an invisible armor, one stronger than any physical protection. The court slowly began to stir, the nobles whispering among themselves. Some were impressed, some annoyed, but all understood the Emperor's decision was final. Mara felt the tension ease slightly, though she knew the danger had not fully passed. As they walked toward the inner chambers, Mara glanced at the young prince. His glare followed her like a shadow. She knew this apology, this act of honor, had unsettled him, and she knew that future encounters would not be easy. Yet, for the first time, she felt she could face whatever came next. The Emperor spoke quietly as they walked. "Do not mistake this court for safe. Respect can protect you, but it does not remove danger. Be vigilant, learn quickly, and above all, do not underestimate yourself." Mara nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. In this world, every decision mattered. Every step she took could alter perceptions, spark rivalries, or build alliances. Humans might be seen as fragile, but they were also clever, adaptable, and sometimes unstoppable. The palace corridor stretched endlessly before them, filled with shadows, glowing symbols, and silent observers. Mara felt her pulse quicken. She had survived the first real test, but she knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The young prince's anger, the whispers of other nobles, and the mysteries of the palace itself. All were waiting for the next move. Yet Mara felt a spark of determination. The Emperor had recognized her courage. She had shown that humans could stand tall, even in a world of giants. And she realized, for the first time, that perhaps humans were not as powerless as the aliens believed. The suns outside dipped lower, casting long shadows across the palace floors. Mara took a deep breath, feeling both fear and pride. She was no longer just a human girl in an alien palace. She was a presence that could not be ignored, a symbol of courage in a world that measured strength differently. And with the Emperor's apology and recognition, Mara understood one undeniable truth. She had changed the course of events in the palace, and perhaps in the galaxy itself. The palace seemed quieter than usual that evening, but Mara knew better. The silence was not peace. It was a calm before a storm. Shadows stretched across the marble floors, glowing softly under the golden lights of the palace. Every whisper, every glance carried weight. Mara could feel it. She was no longer a visitor. She was part of the palace's pulse, and every beat carried danger. The young prince had retreated to his chambers, but his presence lingered like a storm cloud. He was not one to forgive easily. The emperor's apology to Mara had wounded his pride, and he would not let it go unnoticed. Mara sensed his anger, even from across the hall. It was a quiet, simmering fury, one that promised trouble in the hours to come. Some of the court had already begun murmuring. Older nobles, conservative and proud, whispered about the emperor's unusual decision and favoring a human over his own kind. Mara could not understand the words fully, but the tone was unmistakable. These whispers were seeds of conflict, and she realized that the palace had become a battlefield of subtle schemes and hidden motives. As she walked beside the emperor toward the inner chambers, Mara noticed how the courtiers' eyes followed her, not with curiosity anymore, but with calculation. Each glance seemed to ask, who is she really? What does she want? Can she be controlled? Mara understood then that survival here required more than courage. It would require intelligence, patience, and observation. You are aware, the emperor said quietly, that some of my court do not yet accept your presence. They measure you by their rules, not by your actions. That will not change overnight. I understand, your majesty, Mara replied, keeping her voice steady. I will do my best. The emperor nodded slightly, but his eyes remained sharp. Caution is as important as courage. Remember that. Mara felt the weight of his words. This was no longer a simple visit. Every step she took, every word she spoke, could influence alliances, spark resentment, or even provoke danger. She had learned that courage had earned her respect, but respect alone would not guarantee safety. Meanwhile, in the young prince's chambers, a storm of anger and humiliation raged. He paced back and forth, voice low but furious. How dare he apologize to her? He muttered. How dare he recognize a human as equal? A group of loyal nobles had gathered around him, their faces tight with worry, but eyes burning with ambition. Your Highness, one whispered, we cannot ignore this. If humans are seen as worthy of respect, our influence weakens. We must act before it spreads. The prince's eyes gleamed. Yes, he said, his voice cold. We will teach her and the palace that humans are not to be trusted, that arrogance has consequences. Back in the central halls, Mara felt the palace's tension shift. Courtiers glanced at one another, speaking in hushed tones. Some moved closer to watch her, others moved away, uncomfortable with her presence. Mara realized that she had entered a web of subtle schemes, each thread invisible but dangerous. The emperor led her to a quieter chamber, adorned with intricate alien murals depicting battles and victories. Mara studied them with fascination, realizing that the images told stories of power, honor, and conquest. But she also noticed the subtle messages embedded in them, warnings, lessons, even threats. Every corner of this palace was alive with meaning, and Mara understood that knowledge could be as important as courage. You must learn quickly, the emperor said, breaking her thoughts. Observe everything. Listen. Think. The palace is not kind to those who are unprepared. I will, Mara said, determination rising in her chest. I want to understand. The emperor studied her silently, then spoke again. Good. But remember, observation is not enough. Action may be required. And sometimes the actions of others will force your hand, even when you least expect it. Mara felt a chill. She knew this palace was not just a place of grandeur. It was a place of politics, manipulation, and danger. Even a small misstep could spark conflict. And with the prince's anger simmering, Mara realized the danger was closer than ever. Hours passed, and the palace seemed calm. Mara moved carefully through the corridors, noting the subtle movements of courtiers, the whispers behind closed doors, the silent gestures that carried meaning she could barely understand. She realized that in this world, power was not always physical. It was observation, strategy, and influence. Then, without warning, the hallways erupted into chaos. A group of guards rushed past her, weapons drawn, shouting alarms that echoed through the palace. Mara froze, heart pounding. What had happened? The young prince had acted. Mara could feel it in the energy of the palace, the sudden tension that crackled in the air. Courtiers moved quickly, some in fear, some in silent calculation. The emperor's presence, calm yet commanding, spread authority. But Mara could see the strain even in his composure. "Stay close," the emperor said, his voice low. "Do not interfere unless necessary." Mara nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the balcony. She could see the source of the disturbance. A small group of nobles had tried to challenge her presence directly, questioning her right to walk freely in the palace. Their arrogance was clear, but they underestimated the emperor's authority. The emperor stepped forward, voice ringing through the hall. "This palace is under my command. No one will act against my guest. Do you understand?" The nobles hesitated, and Mara could see the realization dawn on their faces. The emperor was not just a figurehead. He was absolute authority, and today he had chosen to protect her. But the danger was not over. The young prince watched in the shadows, his anger deepening. Mara understood that while the emperor's words protected her now, the prince's schemes would continue. She would have to remain vigilant, anticipate threats, and act carefully. Mara's thoughts turned inward. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were clever. They could adapt, survive, and even influence worlds far beyond their size. She had survived once because of courage, but now she realized survival would require both courage and cunning. The emperor, sensing her reflection, spoke softly. "Do not be afraid of challenges. Fear is natural, but it cannot guide your actions. You must rely on observation, reason, and strategy. You are not just a human guest. You are part of this palace's balance." Mara nodded, absorbing every word. She understood that in this palace, every move mattered. A single gesture could spark loyalty, resentment, or danger. And with the prince plotting, every action was amplified, every glance scrutinized. Later that evening, Mara observed the prince in the great hall. He moved silently, speaking to courtiers with subtle authority, trying to rally support against her. Mara could see the glances, the nods, the whispered agreements. The palace was alive with schemes, and she realized she was at the center of it. But Mara also noticed cracks in the prince's plan. Not all nobles were willing to oppose the emperor's decision. Some watched quietly, curious about the human girl who had earned respect in a palace where humans were typically insignificant. Mara realized that even in this world of power and pride, humans could influence events, sometimes without a single weapon, simply by showing courage and intelligence. Hours turned into the night. The palace quieted, but Mara could feel the tension lingering like a storm cloud. She knew the prince would not stop. Some nobles would continue plotting, and some would wait for a single misstep, ready to use it against her. Yet Mara felt a new sense of strength. She had survived the palace's first challenges. She had earned the emperor's respect, and she had observed, learned, and adapted. In a world ruled by giants, humans had one advantage: cleverness, resilience, and the courage to act when others falter. As she retired to her chamber, Mara realized something important. The palace had tested her once, and she had passed. But the real test was just beginning. The prince and his allies would not give up easily. Danger, intrigue, and challenge awaited at every corner. And Mara, human though she was, knew she was ready. Because in a world where power and pride ruled, courage alone was not enough. But courage paired with intelligence, strategy, and heart, that could change everything. And Mara intended to change the balance of power in this palace, whether the aliens were ready or not. The palace was quiet as dawn broke over the glowing towers. The three suns rose slowly, casting soft light across the polished floors, golden and warm. Yet beneath the calm surface, Mara could feel tension still simmering. The young prince had not forgiven her. Some of the courtiers still whispered, plotting in shadows. Mara knew that even though the emperor had declared his protection, the palace was a dangerous place. Survival required more than courage now. It demanded strategy, observation, and calm resolve. She moved carefully through the halls, every step measured. Her human senses, sharper than the aliens might expect, picked up subtle shifts in energy. A whisper here, a glance there, a twitch of a hand. Every detail could mean danger or opportunity. The young prince was not idle. Mara had watched him the previous night, speaking quietly to courtiers who shared his frustration. They had plotted, subtly, to discredit her. Perhaps they would attempt to humiliate her publicly. Perhaps they would test the emperor's patience. Mara did not know, but she understood one thing clearly. The palace would not allow her peace. Not yet. The emperor appeared at the end of a long corridor, his presence calm but commanding. Mara felt a wave of reassurance. He was a force unlike any other, and his protection was her greatest shield. Yet she also knew that relying on him alone would not be enough. She had to act, to show her worth, and to ensure her survival and respect in this alien court. "Human," the emperor said softly, his eyes scanning her carefully. "The time has come to face the challenges directly. Your courage has been proven, but now you must demonstrate your wisdom and composure as well." Mara nodded. She felt her pulse quicken. She understood what he meant. This was not merely a test of bravery. This was a test of presence, of influence, of the ability to stand firm when others sought to undermine her. As they entered the main hall, Mara noticed the courtiers gathered, their expressions a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and unease. The young prince stood at the center, a mask of composure hiding the storm beneath. His allies flanked him, subtle signals passing between them. Gestures, glances, almost invisible yet full of meaning. Mara felt the weight of the challenge pressing against her, but she refused to shrink away. The emperor raised his voice, calm and steady. "This hall has been witness to tension, to pride, and to challenge. Today, we will witness something rarer still. Recognition, respect, and the courage to stand where others falter." Mara inhaled deeply. She could feel the eyes of every noble on her, measuring her. This was a moment to act with clarity, to show that humans, though small and seemingly fragile, could command respect with courage, intelligence, and integrity. The young prince stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, voice even, "I cannot accept that a human stands here untested, in our presence. It is improper." The emperor's eyes, sharp and unwavering, met the prince's. "Improper?" he asked softly. "Courage and dignity are not measured by origin. This human has acted with more restraint and intelligence than some among us. She has earned her place here." Mara felt a surge of confidence. She stepped forward slightly, meeting the emperor's gaze. "Your Highness," she said, voice steady, "I do not seek to challenge anyone. I am only here to learn, to observe, and act honorably. If I have caused offense, I apologize, but I will not shrink from truth or courage." A ripple of surprise passed through the court. The human girl, small and alone, spoke with authority, calmness, and dignity. The courtiers exchanged glances. Some whispered quietly, impressed by her composure. Others scowled, but even their scowls faltered under the weight of the emperor's presence. The young prince's face flushed with anger, but he hesitated. The emperor's eyes held him still, and Mara's words had sown doubt. The palace was a place of pride, but pride could be tempered by courage and clarity. Mara realized that words could be as powerful as any weapon, and she had used them wisely. The emperor stepped closer to Mara, his voice carrying over the hall. "You have done well," he said. "Courage alone is not enough to earn respect. Wisdom, patience, and the ability to remain steadfast under pressure are rarer still. You have shown all these qualities." Mara felt her chest swell with pride, but she remained composed. She knew the challenge was not over. The young prince still harbored anger, and some courtiers still plotted in secret. But she had earned something invaluable: the emperor's public acknowledgement of her worth. A sudden movement caught her attention. One of the prince's allies tried to step forward, perhaps to challenge her further. Mara's reflexes were quick. She stepped aside, calm yet confident, showing no fear. The emperor's hand moved slightly, a subtle gesture, and the would-be challenger froze. Mara realized the emperor's subtle guidance was part of the lesson. Courage was strengthened by observation and action. The young prince's voice broke the silence again, quieter now, almost grudgingly. "Perhaps we misjudged her." Mara's eyes met his. She could see the struggle in his expression, the battle between wounded pride and recognition of reality. She nodded slightly, not arrogantly, but with quiet acknowledgement. The human heart, small as it might be, could inspire reflection even in the hearts of powerful aliens. The emperor raised his hand, signaling for silence. "Let this moment serve as a lesson," he said. "Courage and dignity are not defined by size, strength, or origin. Even the smallest being can influence the balance of power. Respect is earned through action, integrity, and courage. Let all who witness this remember it." The court was silent, absorbing his words. Mara felt the weight of the moment. She had survived challenges, faced arrogance, and stood firm. But more importantly, she had demonstrated that humans, though fragile in form, could command respect and even influence the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The young prince bowed his head slightly, a gesture of reluctant acknowledgement. Mara felt a surge of triumph. The battle had not been physical, but had been no less real. The palace's subtle hierarchy, its pride, and its intrigue had been navigated successfully, and she had emerged with dignity intact. The emperor turned to Mara, his gaze softening. "You have earned respect here," he said. "Not as a guest, not as a curiosity, but as a being capable of courage, intelligence, and wisdom. Remember this. Humans are often underestimated, but those who act with heart and mind together can change even the most rigid of systems." Mara bowed deeply, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will not forget your words." The court slowly began to disperse, murmurs of admiration and surprise spreading through the halls. Mara noticed that even those who had doubted her before now regarded her with a quiet respect. The young prince lingered, his eyes still sharp, but there was a shift, acknowledgement that she had proven herself. Mara realized that respect, once earned, was a shield stronger than any weapon. Courage had opened the door, but wisdom and composure had secured her place. She had learned a valuable lesson. In a world of power, pride, and hierarchy, the smallest being can make the largest difference with the right balance of heart, mind, and courage. The emperor guided her to the balcony once more. The city below glowed under the rising suns, alive with movement and light. "Look closely," he said. "The galaxy is vast, and the challenges you face are only beginning. But know this, your courage has been recognized. Your presence here matters. Humans may be small, but they are far from powerless." Mara gazed at the city, feeling a surge of determination. She had entered the palace uncertain and alone, but she had emerged not just alive, but respected. The emperor's words, the acknowledgement from the court, and even the reluctant recognition of the young prince all combined to reinforce a truth she had always felt. Humans could endure, adapt, and influence worlds far larger than themselves. As the suns rose higher, Mara took a deep breath. The palace was still full of intrigue, and the young prince's schemes were not finished. But she had survived the greatest challenge of the day. She had faced arrogance, navigated tension, and earned respect. And Mara knew that this was only the beginning. The palace, the court, and even the emperor had recognized one undeniable truth. Humans were more than they appeared. And Mara, human though she was, had proved that courage, wisdom, and dignity could stand against even the mightiest of beings. With that, Mara stepped forward onto the balcony, looking out over the city. She was no longer just a visitor. She was a presence, a symbol of courage, and a reminder that even the smallest could command respect. And somewhere in the depth of the palace, the young prince clenched his fists, realizing that a human girl had not only survived his schemes, but had also changed the way the court viewed strength and honor. Mara's journey in this palace was far from over. There would be more tests, more challenges, and more moments where courage and wisdom would be needed. But for now, she had earned what few humans ever did: respect in the heart of the alien empire. The suns bathed the palace in golden light, and Mara smiled. She was ready for whatever came next.